printed. Okay, live stream's on.
Well, let me know. Basically, things I have that I asked for this. So.
Yeah, I think there was just a couple items there that, I don't think we could get to them because we don't
No, not all
Related to sort of issues. And that's what's been going on all this time.
How are you? Good, how are you doing? Oh, another one for Disney. Hi, good, how are you doing?
Lord, I've got your resolution being printed as we speak, and I'm gonna go get it in just a minute.
Do you need anything?
I've got stuff on my copier, but I gotta start with it. I get it. So I get it. I'll send you back the one.
I feel like your shirt represents
Thank you.
where you want to be right now.
That's my passion. Chasing them out west.
Yeah.
It seems as though maybe this might be a little bit more serious and probably more than any other design for that. Okay, so I'll get that together. Okay. This one was, the actual development agreement that the things that negotiated. And this was Mayor City staff. That's when all of this started back and forth. Squabbling. But the others like this.
That's okay.
Many citizens and many of the people who are involved in that squad I understand for agenda, but I don't understand what are the actual packet items which you need to should it's something for council. And I think usually there's something to make the So, it's another one, sharing
There should be a camera in there somewhere.
It's about a Monday, isn't it?
This is the policy. You did the policy, okay. You need it? Or you have it?
It's like, no, you don't have them, you my mind.
Oh, that's yours. Okay, I'm
Well,
sorry.
that was awful nice that you had it. Okay.
Here, there's a whole bunch of copies I made.
While we're out. Okay. But yeah, okay. Thank you, Mayor.
I don't know. I don't know. It's okay. I'll get
And just, I was gonna say, just so y'all know, I'm on team one because I went out to that ball game because it's not too far from our office last Friday. So we're taking full and complete credit for the campus. High school was last Friday.
Oh, really? Yeah, I don't know what that does for us here, but I think we're guaranteed that pick up a part or not. I gotta ask one of them.
If he doesn't get out of school, he'll be here shortly, because 4:30 is his pushing.
I gotta play 5
That's his trash.
Actually, they're,
Dave's rig, we just did a bunch of maintenance to all our sites.
sort of weird. Just like you do,
Oh, check the rec hall. Wow.
Good, how are you? Good.
So, I'm supervisor, put in there, you won't be evicted if they do not.
Yes, ma'am. No, we're not. Wait a minute. What's going on with my recording? Hang on one second. My recording is.
Cowboys are on at 7:15.
Pretty quick. And
All
you're
right.
appointed?
Yeah.
And you're appointed.
Angela, this is not letting me
Call
open
this
it.
meeting to order, for 5.
The recording.
Are you good?
The live stream on the recording is not working as we speak.
But the live stream's on?
Yes, it is. Let me get on this one. Try this one.
There you go. Okay. Put it, okay. Got my computer?
Let me look here. It's live streaming, so the recording is going up. It's just not, my audio is not for some reason on the regular. I apologize. She's gonna have to put it on a laptop and get it going.
Would you rather sit here?
Mhm.
It's already on.
It's on. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Good?
Yes.
All right, we're going to call this meeting to order at 4:35. We're meeting to have a special call meeting. Let the record show that all are here except Mr. Byers. All right. Citizen comments, we'll open to citizen comments. I have one that I was asked to read. I can copy it. And the citizen comments, this one did have a date on it, unlike the one before. The one before that was read didn't actually have a date or which meeting. This is from Terry Beck, 104 Harvest Moon, Castroville, Texas. I'm a lifelong resident of Castroville and have served on city council, and I am very disappointed and concerned at the way our local government is functioning. The Texas Local Government Code clearly defines each of your roles and our powers and duties as a member of this administration and as an employee in some instances. If I am mayor, any ordinance, resolution, or other documents that are in direct conflict with state statute would be repealed and shredded. The problem with this administration is that some of you do not like each other and are not willing to work with each other, and that is unfortunate because that is not why you were elected. There is a certain level of, level of compromise that is in the best interest of the city. Right now, you're functioning like Congress, and I, as a taxpayer, am very disappointed in this type of representation. If you want to argue, go into executive session and do that, and not an open session, because it is not healthy for you or the city. You're not going to win every vote, but here is a good tactic to consider using on decisions. If you can justify to me support for any topic and a means to pay for it, I would consider supporting it. If not, it is probably not necessary at this time. I expect better than this from any elected official, and I didn't read this ahead of time. I expect better than this from any elected official, and I pray you will take these comments into consideration. Thank you. Any more citizens' comments?
That can just go in the record if you don't mind when we do them.
Yes, it's,
That's okay. Thank you.
it's in pieces. You've got to figure out how to piece it together.
That's okay. I'll just put it on. Just tell you what.
So, this meeting was called because of, you're all aware we aren't getting along, and I think I will agree. I've had my straw that broke the camel's back, and felt as if we were never going forward because we're spending too much time on things that, as Mr. Beck said, actually, we're not healthy for the city, and they were not essential items for the city. So we discussed this after a long discussion during a development meeting, and asked that the city attorney come and give us the guidelines so we can start working together, which would mean following rules. So if it says I do this, I do that. And the same goes for staff and council. There's a lot of development coming up. I really want this thing to work, and I really want to work with you guys, because citizens are the ones we're working for. These lists of things that we're going to talk about, I'm not real sure about how they are on here, but Records retention, I assume that's Deborah's request?
Well, yes, ma'am, it's on emails, phone conversations, or texts for the council, because it's kind of a gray area when they first started this, a year, 2 years ago, to where everybody will know how long to keep the information. So,
And we have our attorney who will help us.
yes. And yes.
All right, so, first off, a couple of things, just kind of housekeeping matters. So one is, remember, as the attorney, you know, I give legal advice. I'm not the etiquette pro, I don't give personality tips, I don't give behavior tips, I give legal advice. So what we're gonna have in here is just basically, what's the legal parameters? And then you guys kind of have to fill out the meat, you know, the meat on that as to how that's gonna work, you know, for y'all legally. Secondly, I'm the city attorney, and I will give legal advice. And so I repeat that just because, you know, frequently it's like, well, you know, this dynamic is happening or that dynamic is happening. And so those are generally things that I can't control, and things that I have learned over the years. There's advice and there's really good advice, and clients tend to take me to one of those when it comes to just being advice. Clients across the board, you take legal advice very, very well, everybody does, but then when it just comes, you know, comes down to just, you know, a matter of advice, all of that to y'all's good hands. So with that in mind, we bumped into a couple of issues here recently. Some of it I have bumped into simply because I'm filling in for Habib while he's out recovering. Which, by the way, he's doing very well. Yeah, he had to go back and have a second surgery, but even that's gone very well. So he is quite on the mend. We're glad to hear that. So we'll start out with a high note. But from there, we're going to go into kind of the nitty gritty. And so this is going to be the 10,000-foot overview, because there have been some case law that's happened and some legislative changes that have happened that affect what is a local government record, what's that record retention period for it, do I actually have to keep it, when do I have to keep it. So we're just going to kind of hit the high points out of all of this information. So this is probably something that y'all are pretty much used to, a local government record. These days, it's anything. If it's written, if it's chiseled in stone, if it starts with anything that has an E or an I in it, an iPhone, an iPad, an I this, I that, if it's got an electronic, an email, a text, or whatever, and it talks about city business, and you are a public official, an appointed official, or an employee of the city, whatever you're texting, you're emailing, you're iPadding, whatever you're doing, if it involves a city matter, it's a local government record. All right, so this is the actual statutory version of it, but the long and short of it is, if it's recorded and chiseled in stone or on electronic somewhere, it's a government record. What it doesn't include are just kind of sometimes little sticky notes, note to self, do X, Y, and Z, maybe your own journal entry or diary entry, something along those lines. But even those lines are starting to be blurred. If you write it down somewhere, if it's on a notepad somewhere, and somebody thinks that they can have it, you will likely get an open record request for it. And a lot of cities do. So I always tell everybody, just if you don't want it to see it in the newspaper, if your grandma would be embarrassed to read it, as it relates to your job function, you just don't put it in writing. People these days, we are very, very used to electronics, so we like to text, we like to create a paper trail, and I am telling you, if you've watched any mafia movies, Goodfellas, anything like that, what are they doing? Let's walk and talk. Let's walk and talk. Why? Because you can't trace the walk and talk. So, and besides that, I think sometimes there's a lot more that can be conveyed when you actually pick up the phone and talk to each other. But that's just my personal feeling, and that's just my advice, and I will skip on from there. One of the biggest cases that kind of brought all of this to play was a case that our office handled back in 2015, and we lost big. But it was worth the effort because it was such a gray area. Because for years and years and years, the rule has been if it was on your personal device, it was on your personal phone, your personal laptop, anything along those lines, the city, quote, didn't actually have access to it. And the only way you could get access to it was to ask somebody, hey, do you mind sending me your stuff? And for that reason, because it wasn't in the city's domain and control, it was not considered a record of the city. So in 2015, that got challenged. And it got challenged by then County Commissioner Atkinson for Bear County. He had a whole lot of records, county records, just all sorts of projects and things that he worked on. His personal email, from his personal computer, from his personal office at home. And so, long and short of it, after about a 3 years fight, the court finally went through and made a ruling and said, no, those are public records, they have to be turned over. So if you've got them, just know that they are public records and subject to records retention and control policies, which we're going to touch on here in just a bit. All right. A little bit more law, but I figure we've covered that. So, if it's written, produced, collected, assembled, maintained by an individual, an officer, employee of the governmental body, pertains to official business of the governmental body, it's a record. And it can really be something just as simple as, hey, remember that, on such and such day, we've got a meeting, you need to bring, X, Y, and Z information with you. Not a big deal. It doesn't have a lot of information in it, but it's a record. I'm going to go back to this one in just a little bit, or I'm going to backtrack to this one for just a moment. So, folks, a lot of folks, we are in the habit of, we're going to keep stuff, right? And we're going to keep it for that day when we need it. And so because we're going to track everything. I'm going to keep you a copy of that email in my email box. Maybe I'm going to archive it, but I'm going to print me out a copy, and I'm going to keep it because, the next time this comes up, I'm going to win that argument, I'm going to win that fight. Or, so-and-so said this to me, I'm documenting it and making a record of it. That's all well and fine, but I can tell you from experience, from a legal standpoint, if you are keeping records beyond your record retention period, that is more than likely going to bite you on the butt than it's actually going to help you. So if you have established the habit of, I'm going to keep 10 years worth of emails so I can prove it someday, you're probably just creating a big electronic mess for yourself.
Could I, in the case of mayor's emails on the city server that were used back and forth, so Ms. Howard would have, what is the length to keep those?
So on the length for emails is a nice solid legal answer. It depends. And I'll give you an example. So my first example was, hey, we've got a meeting, make sure to bring a copy of these records with you so we can discuss it. That's a record that basically has, quote, administrative value. Okay, and so you look to the records control program, and I didn't actually look to the city's record control program, but if you have adopted the normal one, those kind of records, 6 months or less, and they're gone. Okay, that's different from an email that says, no, we do not agree to your proposed contract terms. That is not, here's what the city proposed, X, Y, and Z. If you're in agreement with this, please respond. All right. Those are contract negotiations, and that's going to be attached to a contract somewhere. And so those records may have to be kept up to a 4-year period with contracts, from that date. So emails are, and that kind of electronic kind of transitory documentation, you just really have to check what's the value of that particular record. And so the more you want to I go through every couple of weeks and just kind of delete out what I refer to as my trash mail. The things that they send you, remember, you have to be in such and such place, at 6 o'clock. Those sorts of things, I'm done with them. Because I'm done, because it doesn't serve any purpose other than to make me get to where I need to be. The higher value, the higher importance, within that message, the longer that retention period is going to be.
All right. So, for example, we had no continuity. The previous administration, everybody left. The only person that left is Fred and council members who've been on council for a while. So when I took office, I had no information whatsoever. So I did refer to, because I had the same mayor address, I did refer back to the emails in that case, because that's what they were. They weren't frivolous emails. And, for example, you guys are working on a case with the East Side sanitary system. And quite frankly, there are a lot of records that the new staff wasn't aware of, and minutes and communications that even our city attorney wasn't aware of, that I procured from those past emails. So what would be, to me, it's a best practice in a city like ours where the continuity has been awful, and we've had such a turnover with personnel, and there's nothing left because it's typically an angry resignation.
Sure. Probably one of the easiest things that you can do is have your IT person go through and just make sure that all right, you know, Administrator A is left. Please make sure that we archive those emails and, you know, get them saved somewhere in case we need to reference them. And just so that one, you free up your space, your usable space on your computer system, but two, also so that they are saved somewhere, and that if reference needs to be made to them, there's a handy dandy place to actually go out there and find them.
Okay.
And so, and that's a tool that a lot of cities use because they do have turnover. And so it is just, if you can get somebody to go through and say, okay, on such and such date, archive that, move that forward, you know.
Good.
New public administrator, you know, or administrative person is going to take forward, you know, from here forward. So that's kind of the best way to do that.
Did you, on the city computers, when they just made the change for email, there's no way to delete the email anymore. Cannot delete email. You can only archive.
Well, there you go.
Our HTS is our provider, or they're our third party, and they're aware of the retentions and all, and that's just like on the iPads for the council members when they change out. Only the password has changed. They keep the same email, so they would have the emails.
So those could all be archived by HTS, and then if the need arose.
Right, and if the need arises because of the way that they archive them, you can usually do a word search rather than having to dig through, you know, 50,000 pages of emails to find the one that you need.
Thank you.
Additional legalese on what is a local government record, and it just kind of continues through there. And it says, you know, may be disposed at the discretion of the custodian. All right, so in this case, the custodian for all of your records is going to be your city secretary that is assigned by ordinance. So if Deborah comes and goes, and hopefully she stays long, you know, whoever, you know, fills those shoes, that's the next custodian of record.
We also contract with RCI, which is a very good company, and they come every 2 years and look at our records and archive them, and you know.
That's
Who is it? I'm sorry.
RCI. RCI.
Do they scan into microfiche?
No, we have not spent the money on that yet.
Okay.
But they go through, and of course, everything up there is through the state retention schedule. And so whatever's permanent stays, and of course, they put the dates on when they can be destroyed. They're very good. And at some point, we're going to put it probably in hopefully in the budget to one day scan it to microfiche or laserfiche, something of that nature.
I'm sorry to interrupt again. So our records, because I did this in the Air Force, so our list of destroy, whatever, is that by ordinance, or there's a local code or legislation?
So the city has adopted record retention policy.
Oh, it is a policy.
So there is actually an ordinance for your records retention, and as it does for most cities, you know, it says, please make sure you check the state's library, the state library's website for the records control schedule. So you just kind of click the link and it'll pop you over to local government, and local government has its own set of schedules regarding, you know, how long each record is preserved.
The active, inactive, and the destruction.
Right. So here's the big kicker. Social media. So we, as in those of us in the local government business, we've been fighting back and forth for a long while now as to social media use and how that may create a record, and that goes back and forth. And as some of y'all recall, I think it was probably last year sometime, there was a big federal case, literally, regarding, President Trump's tweets and the deletion of tweets and so forth and so on. So, as it turns out, the state legislature decided to help us all out to make sure that we understood what's a record and who's a custodian of that record. They actually passed HB 944. So basically, it makes everybody a temporary custodian of those electronic types of messages. All right. So beforehand, it was just known by case law that Atkins case, that emails, texts, those sorts of things. So beforehand, it was just known through that case law that those types of records were government records and had to be kept under, retention periods and were subject to Public Information Act requests. All right, so going forward, this past legislature, they said, well, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and codify that and make it the law. So HB 944 went through and said, everybody, if you've done it, you are a temporary custodian of that record, and you are required, if you get that request, and how that request is going to come is it's going to come to the city secretary. It may go to somebody else, but it's going to come to the city secretary and say, I want a copy of Councilwoman Martinez's emails, for such and such period. And so there's going to be a form that's going to come out to you that says, we need to respond to this request. Here's the request. Please produce. Right, and then,
Information Act.
right. And then you're going to check off the box. You're going to say, oh, I have some, and here's the copies of it, or I don't have some, or you'll never take me alive. Whatever response you want to get in there, just know that, if the response is you'll never take me alive, and they find you alive, there are penalty provisions written into the law. But I'm going to kind of skip over those penalty provisions just because with this information you can go through and do your in-depth reading and knowledge on that one. All right. So here was the provision that now talks about tweets and posts. So for those of you who are Instagrammers and tweet and all that sort of stuff, just know that you need to be sure that you are somehow capturing your records if you are doing this, because I know some of these, they burn on read, right? Yeah, so you post it up there, whoever's supposed to, you read and it's gone. So you just need to be aware that, and there again, frequently those types of tweets and those texts and that sort of stuff, Instagram, they don't have a whole lot of administrative value, but occasionally they do, and if you're not keeping them, you can almost be guaranteed if somebody wants to burn you with it, they've kept a copy of it, and it will surface at some point in time. So just, be aware that those sorts of things, you have to pay attention.
I don't do tweeting, but when you said that it comes and goes, how would they retain it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I haven't figured that out either. I don't pretend to know how to do these things because I personally think that everything, tweets, text, Facebooking, all that, I personally believe it's the devil. And so I just don't do it. And I, when my kids try to teach me, I just don't.
Get the cross out.
Yeah.
Tweets or they could tweet, just tweet.
Snapchat.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of things out there, and there are probably some sort of forums out there I'm not even aware of. I don't even know exist, but probably all our junior high kids know what they are and will tell us, how to use them and what you can do with them and how you can save them. But
In this area, we do have, there's Facebook, and I'm the one that's always in trouble for records, but I do keep a record, I archive it. But there is another one called River Bluff Estates, and it's a neighborhood organization.
Next door app.
Next door app.
okay.
And you can sign up, and I'm on it, and she is on it. I think some of the staff is on it. And so that too would have to be.
Yeah, so those types of apps, they are a little bit more problematic, just because we're right here and we're touching on them. Those types of apps, the reason they are problematic is because you are not always aware of who else is on there. And so,
If it's not an invite, it's an invite by the company.
Right, and so I know particularly the Nextdoor app, there's some issues with retaining your records from that app, or trying to get copies of them if you're in that position. I recently worked with another council. They had one council member that was prolific about, being in Nextdoor and doing all the things, but when we tried to get those records so we could archive them properly, we ran into a whole lot of roadblocks. So just be aware that different apps have different requirements, and so know what you're getting into before you start posting there. And there again, I mean, if you're on the Nextdoor app and your posts are limited to, hey, did anybody see the great garage sale down the street? They've got X, Y, and Z. Have at it, all for it. But if it touches on your business as a public official, just be aware you need to make sure who else is in there, because if there's 3 of y'all in there, it's a quorum. It's a quorum. Okay? And so that, it's an issue. So just, be aware. That's all I can say to those. I can't tell you can't do it, because, that is your constitutional right, your First Amendment right to post and tweet and all that. Just be aware of where you're at when you're doing it.
So Facebook would even be considered a forum?
Can
If
be.
you're invited.
It can be.
If you're a member of the page, very definitely.
Yeah.
Mr. Green, I have a question. So as far as on the employee side, I mean, is there something you could maybe help us out with? Because I know we don't really have a social media policy that, in turn, we'd like to do the same thing where we're not, talking badly about the city or whatnot. So
Right. So social media policies for the city, we've got several examples of them, and I'd be happy to send you one. You don't have to recreate a wheel.
Okay.
But basically, the target with social media policies for employees is to make them aware. First off, is that if you're going to be, doing this on behalf of the city, you actually have to be designated to do so. That's usually one of the first rules that we ask that you put in place, so that we just don't have, 5 different people posting and doing. So we put that control in one spot. Sometimes you may have different places that need different locales, just because I see our airport manager here. So airport manager, because he's very specialized, he may need something separate and of his own.
Library also.
Right, so some of these things, PD needs to sometimes frequently be in control of theirs. So, we just have to go through and kind of think out what is it you want to do and where you want to get to, but we have several policies. And the biggest issue for employees that we bump into is just to make employees know, because frequently this is what happens, right? Employee gets disciplined, and that discipline may include termination. And then employee says, well, aha, you know what? I'm going to hit my Facebook, I'm going to hit my whatever.
Everybody know.
And I'm going to let everybody know, and I'm going to let everybody know what I know about what I know and when I knew it. Right? Yeah, because it goes through all of that. And so the thing that in that policy that we warn employees is that you have a First Amendment right to some things, but not a First Amendment right to all things.
Not slandering and all that fun stuff.
And so, and then the other thing is that, because frequently the claim will be, well, I'm going to be a whistleblower, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. We just need to educate our employees to say, no, that's not what a whistleblower is. And so just know that, if you do that, and if we haven't disciplined you to the point of, let's say we're going to terminate you because you're in violation of a policy or something, you could very quickly get there. So the policies go through and outline all of that. So if you don't have one, we do recommend that you get one, and I'm going to send a note to myself here to make sure that we get one.
And this is a segue into something else that we have with interviews with the newspaper, which that happens. But what is the policy on what is said to the newspaper? Because a lot of times council will say things, or someone will say things that haven't been vetted. I don't know what the word is, but
Right.
I think it's public opinion also in that case.
So your ordinance does actually have a provision in there that says, hey, when all possible, we want to make sure that we give one coordinated response on behalf of the city, and that response ought to come through city administrator. That's what the.
It's in our,
Right,
okay.
right. So it is in the ordinance, in there. Now, having said that, like I said, each one of you as a public official, you have an opinion on something, and you have that right to the opinion, and you have the right to talk to the press, about that opinion, and, pros and cons, or whatever the case may be, for that. The only thing that I would recommend in those times is saying, at this particular point in time, I'm Mayor Pro Tem Dyer, and, I evaluated all of this, and it is my position that for my district and the district I represent, this is not a good deal, and, I'm going to vote X, Y, or Z. Okay, and so that is, Mayor Pro Tem Dyer's position on that piece, and he has the right to talk to the press about that, and, whatever information he wants to divulge or not, with that. So everybody, you retain that First Amendment right, of that speech. And so what I would suggest, though, is that of those times when you can say, hey, this is my opinion, or this is my speech as a public official, or this is my speech just as Joe Smith on the streets. So that try to cultivate some sort of guideline and some sort of different in there, because at the end of the day, y'all live in a very small community. So when you go to the Walmart because you just want to run in and get a few things, you can't run in and get a few things, right? Because your constituency sees you there and they're like, I'd like to work with you. Could I have just a few minutes of your time? And they don't. And constituency never differentiates your public from your private. They just don't. Especially in the smaller communities. Larger communities where people don't even know that there's a city council that governs the city. I mean, there's a lot of big cities that people don't even know that there's a city council that governs their city. That's not such an issue because those folks don't know and don't care. Your community, they know y'all.
And to me, this is still, it all has tentacles into even our council sessions when there are discussions and things get out of hand and things are said that shouldn't be said. Like maybe this point was just recently that city staff said that I was overstepping, couldn't do the job. And this was said during the council meeting by Councilman Dyer, which if he could say it, he could say it. But to me, this has the same level of decorum, honesty, I don't know, as social media, Twitter, newspaper, anything else, because this was in the newspaper, it was in meeting minutes, and something like that, it seems it should have come to the city administrator or the mayor first. So we can't tell council members what to say and not to say. But it is off the subject.
So that's going to be one of those time periods is if it's completely off topic, if you've got a discussion on, and I'm just going to use some ridiculous examples here just because it makes it easier to understand. So if you're on the topic of, animal control, and we're talking about, how we're going to handle feral cats, and suddenly, Mayor Pro Tem Dyer, is randomly talking about something else that doesn't have any bearing on that discussion. Well, at that particular point in time, you're right. You are out of order, sir. This is not the time or the place. This is not that discussion. But if we're discussing, a policy for the city regarding decorum or regarding the roles of council member and staff and city administration, well, that may be the most appropriate time to say that. So it's just going to depend on the context of, when that type of comment arises. And so it just always has to be, within what's going on at the time.
And that would be the mayor's role in a council meeting, but that doesn't mean that that particular comment cannot be investigated.
If it's something that needs to that would rise to a level of investigation, then certainly,
Because it's
I didn't actually check your ordinances to see how council initiates an investigation, and I'm willing to bet there is something in there.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of, is this something that rises, to the level that warrants that? Or is it a comment that was just made you know, and there again, just depending on the context of whatever, you know, that discussion is happening at the dais. Because when things are at the dais, there's no question about, you know, what role you are in, you know, when you're there.
Okay.
All right. And then the next piece of information, the piece that really makes that obvious is in case you ever thought about, so let's say I've escaped all of this, I have archived my Facebook, I have saved copies of my tweets and my texts and this, that, and the other, and it's like I've got it all here, now for sure, you know, what do I do with it? When do I do with it? Well, here's the next thing that you need to be aware of, is that if you get a request for open records on it, well, then it's going to fall under the length of time that an open records has to be kept. All right, so if you ever get a request on that, you know, the ability to just delete that and make it go away as a transitory record no longer exists. So just know that if you get hit with a public request, give copies and just go ahead and give it over to Deborah and she'll archive it for you. All right, so as y'all can tell, all of this kind of weaves in and out. So the next piece of this is open meetings. Now, what's a meeting and when's a meeting? All right, so meetings, regular meetings, special call meetings, workshops, work sessions, town hall meetings, training sessions. 3 of us on Facebook in one post, 3 of us next door. All of those can be meetings. Okay? The difference is that the ones that I stated previously, regular, special, workshop, those are going to have posted agendas and they're legitimate meetings. The other ones where 3 may be a quorum and there's discussion about city business going on, those may actually be a meeting, but they're not a posted meeting and therefore they can potentially be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Okay? Now, here's the key thing to remember about violations of the Open Meetings Act. City attorneys, we don't investigate those charges, right? Because that's a charge against our client. We defend our clients against those. All right? But violations of Open Meetings Act, they actually have, there's a criminal penalty, there's a civil penalty that can be involved as well, but there's a criminal penalty, and so there is a mens rea. There has to be some sort of intent. Now, we always tell everybody, you know, the law says that if you meant to be there in that next round, because you know, and you meant to follow this, that, and the other, well, then maybe that meets the intent requirement for a criminal violation. So just be aware that with the changes to the Open Meetings Act, and those were recent changes happened at the beginning of the year, they have changed that up to kind of narrow that definition and make it a little bit more fine-tuned. And so for those of you that are enjoying the e-things and the I-things and all of that posting stuff, just be aware of where you're at and ensure that you know who's part of that group, because you could be unintentionally violating the act. We haven't actually had any that I'm aware of, any criminal prosecutions for that. But the change that's driving all of this came from an actual criminal prosecution where they were actively prosecuting a judge and a couple of judges together in a meeting for a violation of the act. Just know that if judges can do it, generally very aware of what the requirements are, the rest of us locals and regular folks can do that as well. So just be very aware of what you're doing.
I'm afraid I have to interrupt again. I sent an email about some concerns I had as councilwoman when we were selecting our city administrator. And I didn't know that I could not send it to all the council members. And Mr. Carey sent me a warning that I cannot send anything to council, to all of council. So now that I'm mayor, I have everything sent through Ms. Dyer. So that's the way it needs to be done.
Right. So if you have some information that needs to get to all council members, that's the correct way to do it. Is that ask your city administrator or your city secretary, please make sure that you distribute this information to the council members, because And what they will do is they will either do it individually or they will blind copy so that we all don't know, who's on there. And we will, and there's a very specific warning that goes out with those emails. Y'all probably seen it, it says, do not respond to this email. Or it will say, council are blind copied on this email, do not respond. Or you will have some form of warning on that. So, yes, especially between council members, just don't do it. That's the best advice I can give. If you've got a piece of information that needs to get out to everybody for consideration, get it to the appropriate staff person here at City Hall, and then we'll get that out where it needs to be.
But that's only for items for consideration, or what about, I sent out, well, I didn't, but I wanted to send out, when Carrie was hurt, I wanted to send that out to everybody, but I couldn't. I'd have to go through.
Right.
Through Deborah.
It's better if it goes through Deborah.
Through Leroy.
Or any of the appropriate city staff. Now, if you want to send out an email that says Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, by all means, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, because that's not.
You never know if an issue's going to come over, that's an item on the agenda of the next meeting.
Right. So you just want to be, just if you can avoid that scenario, just avoid it. If you get establish those good habits, then you don't have to worry about it later on.
I'm interrupting again, but as far as agenda packets, right now, the city secretary, anyone who asks for a packet, which is the backup information for an agenda item, is sent that packet. But not everybody knows about that. Not all the citizens know. And so historically, it's been sent to people that have asked for it. But sending this out, when I was in the legislative update, they mentioned something about a sequential quorum.
Right.
So if this packet were sent out to all of council, there could be an opportunity that they could make a decision, like, for example, and I was a woman too, so I would call Todd would call Carrie would call, sequential. So, again, you can't prove anything except if all of them come up with the same response or something, which
Right.
obvious.
So when the city secretary, when she forwards out the council packets, that's a legislative duty. You got to get the council packet out to council members, okay? And so normally you are either given a link that says, hey, here's where the packet's at, or your packet's attached, or way back in the day, when I was still doing this, I'd go run all over town to wherever you lived and drop off your packet. And so, that's not the same type of communication with that. But as to your first question, as to those people that have requested a copy of the packet, anybody can request a copy of the packet. They are entitled to that if they're putting in that packet. However, any confidential information has to be removed before that packet can be made available. Most places are now just putting the packet online or putting it on the website. It's available there, and folks, if you want to take a look at it, feel free.
Okay.
And there again, right. If they want to print it, they print it, or you can send an electronic copy of it because, under the open records, if you provide it electronically, you don't have to charge for it.
Publicly available packet, would be redacted personally.
It should. All confidential information. So if there's, an employee, let's say we've got a new employee, you're reviewing the employee information, it's got, a date of birth or TDL or something like that, that has to go out. But also, if you've got some documentation in there for something that's going to be discussed in executive session, and it has been released to the public, that needs to be, redacted out as well.
Or the permanent information could have people's private information.
Right. So that type of information, should be redacted before being made available to the public.
So that would take care of that issue. We just put it up on the website, not have to worry, and Deborah won't have to.
Right. And then that way it's
It's a
available to
link right
anybody who
now.
wants it. And if they're interested, that it's there. All right. There are some very specific provisions in the Public Information Act regarding online messaging board. Just know that it's out there. The city doesn't have any electronics that actually meet the online definition or the government code definition for an online messaging board. It's a very different animal than anything that anybody's using.
We do have one that doesn't work.
We
The
do
website
not.
does not support it anymore because of,
We've had it for years and it doesn't work.
okay, yeah, okay.
It was the same message board that Austin had.
Oh,
The
okay.
previous mayor had went to a seminar and he liked it. And we tried to get it up and our system just wouldn't support it. And now Civic Plus says they can't, so it was never utilized.
It's not a module that's supported with them anymore. If we establish it, anything that could go wrong, any bugs, we would have to fix it and not their customer service.
Yeah.
I thought we
There's
found
a-
something
there's
else.
A lot of folks that just don't deal with it because it takes a lot of IT, to get it to exactly. And I know the city of Austin, like I said, they have people that are dedicated to it. That's what they do all day, every day, so.
So how would we'll just have to, I think it's a good thing to have.
It may be just, you may have to consider it, for budgeting purposes going forward, say, next budget cycle, hey, let's think about, starting the budget, or set aside some money, for that particular process. And when we've got enough squirreled away, maybe this will be a, good project to work on. All right. So agenda, I popped this in here because it seems like we would automatically know it, but I've gotten a lot of questions about agenda in the short time that I've been covering for Habib. So I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to kind of pop it on in here and go over. So remember, anything that's a meeting, work session, town hall meeting, training session, it's a meeting and it has to be posted. And it has to be posted and you have to go through all the steps. And if you got an internet, you gotta make sure it's out there, and I know Deborah makes sure that all that happens. Who prepares the agenda? So, this is generally controlled by your local rules, and for you guys, your local rules is going to be actually in your ordinance, and that's the next item on the agenda that we're going to talk to see if what or how, or start thinking about making any changes to those if necessary. So for the most part, everybody submits their request. I wrote the request somehow or another one way over to the city secretary. She makes sure that gets on the agenda and away we go from there. It's generally items that have been requested by council members at council meeting. It's usually one of the last agenda items for the night. What do we want to talk about the next time? Things that the city administrator knows that he needs to bring forward to council. Things that the city attorney says, well, we got a duty to inform you, so put us on there, we got to tell you about it. And it just kind of works its way through there. All right, so y'all's requirements are actually in your code of ordinances, section 2-4. So I'm not going to read through that to y'all because we're all big kids here, and so the details of how and when for agenda prep are in there. But y'all have some very specific timing requirements for the agenda. And I would hazard a guess, with all the turnover you've had, y'all probably kind of got away from that. But, remember as a council, your duty is to enforce and make sure that we are compliant with ordinances over the city, and most especially those ordinances that govern you as the elected officials. So I would, just recommend you guys, at your leisure, get out there, take a look at that, make sure that you're familiar with that information. Because it's pretty detailed, because I think I've got one more screen that we're using don'ts for agenda prep. But the most important thing to remember here is that if you don't submit it with enough information timely, or if the mayor decides, hey, we don't have room for it on this agenda, there is a requirement that it go on the next agenda. So, if you've missed your shot for one agenda, under your rules, there's a provision in there that says, when that has to be on. So just make sure that you as the council member that's representing that, make sure that you say, okay, this didn't go last time, it needs to be on this one. Yes, sir.
What happens when this doesn't happen? I mean, I have.
It hasn't happened.
In this town, I've been a councilman now for almost a year and a half.
You've been along with Mr. Kelly also.
And I've submitted many agenda items that did not get put on because the mayor, whatever the mayor's reason was, they didn't put them on. But the part there about putting them on the next meeting never seems to happen. So I've had to repeat the letter, maybe write the same letter multiple times to try to get it back on. And it's very frustrating when you can't get an item on the agenda.
And I agree.
Right, and so that's kind of why we're here tonight, because my feeling over all of this, and I'm, like I said, I'm filling in for Naveed Kelly's house, but my sense of this is that I think the fine-tuned details that was in the ordinance, not everybody's aware that that's out there, and not everybody that needs to know is aware that it's out there, and so that's why we're having that training, because I need to make them aware that it's there.
It's very clear. I mean, it's
But-
very clear what has to be done.
Could I-
The issue is that there's never any recourse, there's never any explanation, it's just, no, it's not gonna be on the agenda.
And that's untrue, and I'll be glad to
It's not
supply the
untrue, you're calling me a
emails.
liar. I'm not lying. I've got numerous examples where I've submitted agenda items, I get no explanation, and they don't appear.
There was an overall email sent to everyone that with the agenda item, there must be supporting documentation as to the severity, priority of the item. And if there was not enough documentation, and this was sent out to everybody as soon as I took office, because I had the same problem with Mayor Kelly, absolutely in front of everyone. And he argued with Mayor Kelly also. But Mayor Kelly doesn't give him any recourse. But I'm giving recourses because I sent out an all-council mail that Deborah distributed that said, for your items to be accepted, the packet has to be complete. Because an example would be I asked for electric adjustments, the prior interim city administrator, because we're losing $700 per customer on customer side water loss. And we were losing thousands of dollars a month. So it wasn't in the city ordinance, so I asked that it be put on the agenda. And so the packet was incomplete, but it was on the agenda anyway. And so I don't think council had enough time or wherewithal to really look at it, to make a thorough decision. But we're feeling, there's repercussions now. Another time, there was an item for the restroom, I can't remember, we wanted restrooms in September Square. And I will admit that I did say right now we've got other priorities and we can't get it on this agenda. I did not know I'd have to put it on the other agenda. However, I have asked again and again that anytime there be an agenda item, there be a complete packet with it, not just a
And
letter.
just, so what I anticipate going forward, because like I said, sometimes we just need to bring things forward, get it all out in the open, and so, Mayor Pro Tem Dyer, what I would recommend is, make sure that your material is date stamped, received when it's received, and then make sure that you document, when it should go on next, because what I anticipate going forward is that now that we've gotten all of this kind of fine-tuned, all of, these pieces of information fine-tuned, that we should see that you have more success getting your agenda items, on there. Now, I don't know if you've got a backlog of agenda items, but you might just kind of want to start putting a few of them through at a time, just to, pick and choose which ones are, are nearest and dearest to your heart, start putting them through.
And he needs the packet though, we need the support documentation, correct?
Yeah, so some kind of background. Now, sometimes some agenda items will come forward just to say, hey, this is an agenda item that I need to make council aware of, and this is an agenda item where we need to give a directive to the staff to say, do this research and find out this information and bring it back to council. So in those instances, there may not be a lot of background information that goes with it, because what you need to do is give that directive to your staff to do that and get that going.
So when you give a directive, say you want an update on projects going on, to include projects that are on hold, Public Works is the people for that, and this information, they're the ones that are going to do the background, all the legwork.
That's normally how it happens.
Okay, I'm just making sure I'm hearing you
But I
right.
need to interrupt you.
That's normally how it happens.
We have completely new staff that are not aware of these projects that the council member
Right.
Martinez is requesting. It's going to take a considerable amount of time to get those together.
That is a particular issue for the city. Records retention has been a particular issue, and I realize that a lot of these people are no longer with the city, and so, all we can say to that is that.
I didn't say have it on the next thing.
Yeah,
I don't know, but I'm saying,
I will say that
I'm saying some of the records do not exist.
I know.
Yeah,
And
maybe,
that's,
yeah,
But
maybe.
I found out when I went to the TML thing, a couple of the companies that have done working on our water tanks and stuff like that, they have copies, they have the videos they did of our water wells.
well, could we contact them?
I already got it, I got immediately in contact with Roy the next day and gave him all the information, and he is contacting them to get all the data that was misplaced.
Okay, and so,
And then you just make sure that gets.
Yeah.
she's handling the city, I mean, that's documentation,
And
probably should be in
so,
records.
actually, we're gonna get to
Not
this piece
with the
here
council.
in just a moment, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop us forward just a little bit. But, yeah, so, what I would always recommend is just remember that your staff, not only are they attending to the day-to-day, they've got all of these other really big projects and things going on, so just make sure to give them sufficient time with which to get there. And if nothing else, they can come forward and say, here's where I'm at, it's not gonna be till the next agenda. All right, records retention. So y'all's record retention is in section 2-146 of your code of ordinances in there. And so it fairly clearly, goes out, city secretary is your designated records retention manager. All right, every city record belongs to the city. Nobody has a private right to that information. It is the city's documents. I know from time to time we will have folks say, well, I created that document, it's mine. No, you created it as a city employee on behalf of the city, it's the city's records.
So these records that she's talking about, those people would have to go to Deborah as official city records. Because Deborah doesn't have them, so
That's
they will
correct.
pass to Deborah and not.
Yeah, Roy's getting them though.
Right. Now, whoever needs to work with those records.
So Roy-
needs to see them, but we just need to
Public
make sure.
Works,
Did you know, John? John had no idea, and he's a different department head.
he wasn't in that
Well,
day.
it's still something
Yeah,
that he
So just,
probably
make sure to.
should be
keep those lines
involved
of
in.
Communications going and open, because
Yeah.
things break down, when we're not having, that loop of conversation amongst city staff.
Because that's very important, those records, because we're involved in it. So, just to recap, those
Yeah.
records need to go to the department head, not
One of
Roy.
the things, yeah.
And then from the department head to Deborah.
In general, I try to at least have a copy, especially the ones we don't have. I need a copy, they need a copy, or the original committee needs a copy.
For sure. Now, under the city's ordinances, there's a provision, there's supposed to actually be a records retention committee.
Yep.
So if you don't have one, if you haven't appointed one, or we don't know what's happened since 1985 with one, you as a council, y'all need to visit that,
Yep.
because it is part of the ordinance and it is a requirement, unless you so choose to remove the need to have a records retention committee. So I'm just going to put it out there to either y'all think that over, council, that's, y'all's provision to make that policy.
And I'm interrupting again. They were given this policy quite a while ago to look over and be aware of. We gave it to them months ago. And so they should be well aware of these things.
And I find frequent training is good because you all have had a lot of things that I'm going to call out of the ordinary. And when those sorts of big things happen, your day-to-day house cleaning and keeping, can kind of get put off to the side, because I promise you, I'm going to do my dishes because I have an open kitchen and you're going to see whether I do my dishes or not. But the odds of me cleaning behind my refrigerator, unless I have to actually get behind there, and that's kind of what records retention is. We're going to get there. We're going to do that housekeeping eventually. But just know that it plays a very vital role with the governmental records. All right. So the next three provisions here, 156, 157, and 158, that outlines your record control schedules, your implementation of them, your destruction of records under what schedule, and destruction of unscheduled records as well, because there are some records of the city that don't actually fall within a specific group for the state's record, but this actually details out point by point what has to happen in order to destroy records. And in a nutshell, what that means is that, if we're gonna get rid of boxes, or we're gonna do a cleanup of, this closet, that closet, or this space, or that space, every one of those records that we're gonna chunk, shred, destroy, has to be documented, and it actually needs to come forward to council, and council's actually gonna have to approve that resolution to destroy, documents on said exhibit. So that's the general pattern. But there should be no cleanup of records, anything that doesn't come through your records administrator, which is the city secretary. All right. The next part of this, I'm just going to touch on real clearly, because some of this stuff we have already kind of touched on, but the roles and responsibilities for mayor, council, and staff are outlined here. And they are outlined in your ordinance. So for wherever you're at in the food chain, make sure you go out there, review what when. But overall, the biggest issue, especially for council members, is just know you're required to go through your city administrator for communications with staff, for requesting information from staff. That's not to say you can't talk to staff or whatever, but if you've got something that needs to be checked on, there should be no directive that goes directly to a staff member. So if you see that, there's a pothole, on Avenue X that needs to be, you need to send that email in or let the city administrator know and let them, handle that and review that. The mayor kind of has double duties. So we've got ceremonial duties. We've got some roles and responsibilities that are assigned by the ordinance, and of course, we've got some that are statutory. And so, the biggest issue, for the mayor is, ensuring that that agenda, gets on, that it's prepared in compliance with the ordinance, that we're conducting the meetings in compliance with Robert's Rules of Order, in the decorum that's set up for the council. That we are making sure that, at council meetings, we've got a steady stream of debate going, that, the allotted amount of time is being used or not used, and kind of trying to control that overage. One of the things that I saw in here, which I won't say is different, but one of the things that I saw in here is that basically there was a 15 limit per person for, for discussion, on each item, kind of going forward. Not every item that y'all work on or see before council is going to require that level of debate. But the flip side of that, if additional time is needed because it is a heavy duty, because sometimes you're going to have just 1 or 2 agenda items, and that's all that's going to be on there. And so we're going to be talking about this for a while. What you need to do at the beginning of the meeting is say, we want to suspend that rule.
What is it? Just suspend it?
Right, you want to suspend that rule because under your ordinance, you've got to be following your ordinance, and so it's in that ordinance. And so you need to make sure that you're suspending in your rule that you're not going to be following for that, for that night.
And that has to be done prior to the commencement of the items.
Generally prior to. And now occasionally you're going to get surprised by an item that you didn't anticipate was going to generate that kind of discussion, and so y'all may get down halfway into it and then realize, well, we're going way over, so you may have to get there. But there again, like I said, it's an ordinance, it's a rule of the city, you need to be following it.
So if they want more than 15 minutes, they're going to have to request for, yeah.
Right. And so that's a motion that can be taken out of any order and at any time. So, Councilwoman Martinez, is ramping in on 15 minutes. Councilmember Carey, you've been monitoring it. You can say, ma'am, 1 moment. We need to take this motion, this point of order, out of order and get that going. And so, but just, there again, you're adults, you know how to handle that. Council rules, you represent your district, you represent the folks of the city of Castroville. You are in charge of making that policy that your city staff will implement. And so there's a reason why we have that very distinct demarcation between council and staff. Because you create policy, you create the ordinances, the resolutions, our policies, you know, what the employees are gonna have or not have, what rules and regulations they're gonna fall under. And so it is up to your city administrator and those under him to ensure that those get followed through. And so I can assure you, for those cities that have things that are not working properly, it is because we have folks not staying in their lanes. Anytime we've got council trying to act as a city employee and trying to get to the nitty-gritty level of something, that's where, you know, we kind of have a little chaos going on. And so as long as everybody stays in their lanes, when the mayor's the mayor, stays the mayor, when council's council and acts as the council, and when staff is staff and acts as the staff, everything keeps marching along. Just when these roles kind of get mucked up, that you then have, you have these instances of a lot of turnover with a lot of high degree of emotion, and a lot of it is because we've kind of interwoven what our roles are.
Could you give us a specific definition of policy?
Yes, ma'am. Policy, we were just talking about social media policies.
And
All
this
right.
is something we need to write.
So we were actually going to send you some samples of that, that we know already meet the requirements of the law. So we don't recommend trying to go out there and write one on your own.
Right.
We just don't. We'll send that forward. That policy is going to come forward to the city administrator. The city administrator is going to disseminate that to any of his staff that he thinks needs to weigh in on it. Everybody's going to look through, give their comments, suggestions, put those together. That's going to come forward to city council. City council, y'all are going to look at it once, twice, maybe 3 times or less, just depending on how much time we're going to spend with that. And then you're going to move forward and say, there's a resolution that gets adopted that says this is going to be our social media policy. All right. So in that policy, it's going to say, and oh, by the way, city administrator, you are in charge of enforcing this policy. All right. So now what's going to happen next is Councilmember Carey, who has a secret light at night, to go out there and check everybody's Facebook. He's going to go out there and he's going to find somebody posted something that he thinks is in violation of that policy. His role as a council member is to say, hey, city administrator, I found this. You need to investigate that. You need to follow through with that. You need to do whatever the policy says you need to do.
And that's the issue. We
Right.
don't have policies.
Where the breakdown's going to occur is that council member Carey's going to say, you know what? I just don't think the city administrator, Dallas, is going to do a good enough job on this. I'm going to go out there and investigate it. So I'm going to talk to 10 other people, say, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this? And then they're going to post about what that happened. And then those folks are going to let the employee know. And then the employee's going to be mad and going to talk to 2 other employees. And then eventually somebody's going to talk to the city administrator. And now this thing is blown up. And then somebody's going to call the city attorney that says, Councilman Carey's out there. He's investigating on his own. He's created all this ruckus. Now we have a city employee that's embarrassed and this, that, and the other. And now they want to sue us. What do we do? Well, when we knew that Councilmember Carey was out there investigating his own, that was the time to call us so we could say, excuse me, sir, while we appreciate you're trying to help the city, remember your role is as the policymaker. If you feel like somebody needs to receive some discipline for something that's happened, send it through the appropriate channels.
Yeah, and so that would be an agenda item.
Right, and so, eventually that may come forward to you.
It
may
needs
not,
to.
because the city administrator, who is in charge of enforcing that policy, may determine that this is just a simple write-up that needs to go into the employee's file, and it will never come to council, because it's none of council's business at that particular point in time.
And
But maybe it gets so much further that now we've got to hire somebody, or we've got to do something, or we need to take an action that requires council to vote on it.
And that's the important part, because even with, directing all these projects, blah, 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 which I'm not saying is wrong, but we need a policy, I think, and that's a lot of times when I get in trouble for presenting an agenda item, because I'm interested in getting the policy on, a running list of projects, a running list of, streets that are being fixed. In the past, we always had the department head share what they did with us. So we knew what was going on, and it would kind of eliminate any unneeded agenda items and this kind of discussion and fighting and, stuff like that. So that would be a policy that we would create, that department heads would provide the city
So a lot of
administrator.
cities, what they do is they have their department heads prepare a memo once a month that goes out with the council packet.
And the council would put that on the agenda for a policy.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a policy.
okay.
It doesn't necessarily even have to go on the agenda, but that's a determination that the council makes. And so some folks just say, hey, there's a monthly report that comes forward, and then council reviews that report and says, ooh, this I want an update on, and I want it on the
And-
agenda.
and that's
it goes in.
excellent.
And so
And
then the next time around, it comes
Yeah.
up, on an agenda.
Yeah, I think that'd be very helpful.
But because frequently you've just got way too much going on, and that's what you have staff for, because they're supposed to be handling the business. And occasionally, like I said, you will have a big project or something come up that's gonna need some council intervention. But for the most part, they should just be they should be handling stuff.
Because that'll give council an idea what we are, kind of prioritize things, because there are things that are more, really important right now, especially with
Because what
development.
I will say is that if you have these reports as part of your agenda, and if you have any kind of even minimal discussion on that, you can get used to having meetings that run until midnight. And so, and that kind of defeats the purpose of
So
having
not on
staff
the
that handle
agenda.
business.
So we wouldn't put it on the agenda, we'd give it to, the city administrator would have it.
Right, and those reports could go out once a month. Hey, hey, here's the update. If you see something on this, let us know. You may have one item that needs to come forward on the agenda rather than, let's talk about this, because like I say, you can be there till
Yeah, we would.
a lot. All right,
Thank you.
this is just additional section 2-4, additional roles and responsibilities of council members handling citizens' concerns, when things need to be posted and when they don't, and just kind of following through that. I'm not going to read that to y'all because there again, I'm just going to point it out, it's there, read it at your leisure. All right. Roles and responsibilities for the code of, for staff and staff duties. That's actually codified in section 2-8 of the code of ordinances, and basically that's, this is how it breaks down. You carry out the policy, you come to work, you do your job, you make sure you do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. You make appropriate recommendations to council through the chain of command. So council members, if you've got employee Smith coming to you on a regular basis, whispering in your ear that you've got, something needs to be done, then you need to direct employee Smith over to the appropriate department head or the city administrator and say, take that concern there, get it on an agenda, and we'll talk about it. Because if because that chain goes up and down. And so then, we need to make sure that everybody stay in your lane, everybody does their job, everybody will be my captain. And primarily, here we go, keep council informed, and so that's why I said, if you're not getting a report, we may want to consider that. And there again, I realize we have a lot of new staff,
Yeah.
and they are trying to keep things, they've been hit with a lot of bigger issues, and some of this routine stuff that would normally happen may not be happening, but I promise you, we'll let them get over a couple of these new comes, and those things will smooth over.
Yeah, because some of the stuff we simply don't have, as we said, because of all this, and these guys are moving forward.
Right, they're
and
moving
with
fast.
difficulty.
Yeah. Right, so that's the whole training, is just, to point out for everybody, for some it's a refresher course, for others, oh, wait, I didn't realize that piece of detail, or that detail was in there. So we just kind of, like I said, 10,000 foot overview, just a reminder to everybody there.
And I need to bring one more thing, confidentiality on development negotiations. That is part of our ordinance as well as local government code. So what would be the possibilities, because I know council wants to be involved. So what is we have a resolution that council passed with Mayor Kelly that gave Mayor Kelly and staff full responsibility for negotiations with the current development that's happening there. And I don't know if we need to rescind resolutions, or we change policy, or there's a state law?
So it depends on what was passed. So I'd actually have to see what was passed to figure out, what your next action would be.
Cynthia.
Because depending if it was a resolution, if it was something limited to.
Motion?
No, it was not a resolution. In the discussion, September the 11th, 2018, I pulled the minutes for the mayor today. Council, including the whole council, was in apparently an executive session. I did not go in at that time. They discussed it with Mayor Kelly at the time, and when they came out, they made a motion for him and along with staff to negotiate for this current development that we have that has now since passed. I mean, we have the development agreement. It was for, as far as I know, just this development. It's not necessarily ongoing.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
But with the disappearance of Mayor Kelly and no continuity, Councilman Dyer took it over. And through him, I found out about it. But with things like this, I don't think the other councilmen were aware. I was on council. But, so we develop a policy for that, or is there a local government code about negotiations for
So
annexing?
there is no local government code that's going to, control over who gets to negotiate for the city. Generally, it is a case-by-case basis. It's assigned at, such time as those negotiations need to happen. And normally, coming forward, as new council members get sworn in, they're normally given, I don't even know what to call it, but, a briefing that's what I'm going to call it, that says, this project, that project, the other, this is in the works, this is where it's at. What information do you need, if any? Some council members will say, not interested, not my thing. And others will say, totally on board with that, let me see all that, I want to be on the team. And then you make those changes, going forward.
And then, of course, this would have do not disclose, confidential, blah, blah,
Right,
blah.
right, and so, it just, just depends on, like, the method of what it was and, going forward, because sometimes negotiations happen and they may take a year, but within that year, the same council members are on, so no big issue. There's an update that comes out, it normally comes out in executive session that says here's where we're at, here's where we're going. And sometimes things, overlap from council to council. You just need to make sure that that relay race baton is being passed on to the next council.
And that's, and we've had issues. We haven't had that happen, so it's kind of been turmoil.
So with that, I know that there's a second agenda item on there, but actually we kind of already bumped into it. But what I will point out is all of this, these ordinances and previous versions of them, most of this is codified in the Code of Ordinances, and so that's where I was pulling information from. And so with that, what we normally say is, think it over, think about it, see what kind of changes you want or don't want made, see if there are anything within there regarding, and I'm just going to take agenda prep just because it came up a couple of times this evening, if there's any way, to kind of tighten up what that language is and how it's going to happen. We can provide, examples, go out on the internet, and find examples, and so long as it's not,
That's what I,
contradictory to state law, as far as posting and all that or whatever, you are pretty much free to make your own rules as to how you're going to govern yourselves.
And that's what came up on this ordinance in the past. Previous councils, it was to the point where it was on Friday night when I was posting, when I was getting things. And I couldn't get it done. I mean, I have been here literally till midnight. And it's been recent too. And so, yeah, we just need to hopefully follow the guidelines and get it ahead of time and not change at the last minute and add stuff. Unless it's an emergency, of course.
Right,
Of course.
And I will say this, because if y'all don't know my background, and maybe I've shared it or not, but I am a former city secretary, I'm a former city employee. So I've done everything from reading meters to, what do you mean the city manager quit? He can't quit. so I get it from the employees side of it, and so, I was a little stickler. If you didn't get it in, I'm so sorry, you didn't get it in. You can make all the faces you want to me. You can cuss me, or you can cuss me when, somewhere else when I'm not within your reach, that's all good and fine, but here's the cutoff of the ordinance. It just, you have to respect the sanity of your city secretary. So that's my spiel on behalf of city secretaries everywhere. We want to make sure that they remain sane until such time as they retire.
Poor thing, and so the staff was the
Right,
same.
and staff, because, because I promise you, if it is 8 o'clock at night, and I'm still having to work on the agenda, there's nobody happy, and nobody's gone home yet. Nobody's going home until I'm done. And so that serves two purposes. One is it provides an orderly agenda process, and two, it avoids having to pay overtime or anything else along those lines. I know your city secretary doesn't qualify for that, but if he has to bring staff in to help get it done, we want to avoid those scenarios as much as possible. It's just efficiencies.
And my last question, could you define a resolution, an ordinance, and policy, the differences?
Right, the difference between them. So an ordinance is an actual law, right? It's a local
That
law.
we create
That you
and,
create and require to enforce. Okay, and so that's why I say, if you've not been following the processes that are set up, in the sections that I've identified, you need to be, because as council, you should be the first one making sure that you follow your own local law. So that's what an ordinance does. So an ordinance can only be changed by an ordinance.
right,
Okay. So a resolution is that it provides notice to the public of council support for a certain topic. Example, we want to become a monarch butterfly city. Therefore, we resolve that we will provide milkweed plants, or allow someone to provide milkweed plants so that we can meet, X, Y, and Z as a monarch city, and perhaps we will even, win the award, and therefore, council so resolves we shall be a monarch city. Okay, so that is saying we've got a goal. That's something we want to work towards, and so that is going to be a project that the city is going to work for. So, because you'll always notice there's a difference in the language, right? It says now therefore be ordained, which means we're making this a law, as opposed to a resolution. Now therefore this council resolves that. This is where we're going to put our efforts at.
so the old resolutions that we have, because we have one, it's 139, and it's not in this policy, and it's the resolution that council made for the roles of the city administrator in the past. So that resolution stands until we change it, or should it be put in the policy?
So what I will say is this, is that if the roles and responsibilities and duties of the city administrator were created via resolution, we probably want to fix that.
And put it in the policy?
Right, we actually want to.
Should be an ordinance.
Into the ordinance.
Well, and that's a little confusing on that one only because it states it as an ordinance in the body of it. But then whenever they passed it, they had it as a resolution as the heading. So it's really, it's a little confusing on
Yeah,
it.
so it might need just a quick cleanup and make its round back through to just say, we're going to pass this as an ordinance.
So resolutions, are they good or bad?
Oh, resolutions are great.
But they're,
But they're not local law. It doesn't have an enforcement mechanism, something that says, thou shalt do this or else.
There's no penalties involved.
Right, there are no penalties involved with resolutions. All right, and so policy, as a matter of policy, is just that. This is what, the regulations are for, like we mentioned, social media. Okay, that's a policy. You've got your personnel policy, right, that outlines, how we're going to handle personnel and grievances and appeals and all that sort of stuff. Got a dress code policy, normally, right? You got a code of conduct. So those are all policies have enforcement mechanisms, for violation of policy. Okay, but it's not a local ordinance, it's not a local law that applies to anybody else except for those within the policy. So it's three separate things. One can't take the place of the other. Policies, the only time policy and resolution are going to meet is when we actually draft a resolution that says now therefore council shall resolve that, this will be the policy going forward. So that's the only time resolutions and policies will move.
And so our grievance, that grievance thing that we did?
It's in our personnel policies.
That's a policy. Okay, so it needs to be included.
It is included in our personnel policy.
Okay, okay.
It was an amendment to it.
All right, good,
All
good.
right, and so, I think at this point, our backsides has probably gotten us as far as our brains are gonna want to, retain any information. So what I will suggest, is that at this particular point in time, whichever has some ordinances, otherwise, check out the code of ordinances. If there's any suggestions or some things that y'all wanna check out, get those compiled, get it over to your city administrator, and they'll get that forwarded for review.
And so they could just make marks on the policy, okay, good. But not together.
But not together.
Unless it's in a workshop
Right, let's put a workshop, there we go.
or a working session.
Thank you so much.
So I don't think that there's anything other on the agenda other than adjournment. Deborah, am I correct? I'm sorry.
Correct.
Good, no more
Yes, correct.
questions? All right. So, may I have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
6 o'clock, I believe. 6 o'clock? Got it.
6 up.
There is tea and crackers and all the stuff that I brought over for y'all. Have some. That's salami, crackers, cheese. All of it. And now you're all leaving me.
Thanks, Deborah.